September 30th, 1941, Lorient submarine base, occupied France. Germans remained completely unaware that Allies had broken the Enigma Code, their most trusted secret weapon. Kapitän Heinrich Lehmann-Willenbrock sealed the three-rotor Enigma machine inside its wooden case, the metallic click echoing through U-Boat 96's cramped control room. Diesel fumes mixed with salt air as his crew prepared for another Atlantic patrol. He trusted this machine with his life, with every life aboard his submarine. The device promised absolute secrecy for German naval communications across the vast ocean battleground. What Lehmann-Willenbrock could never imagine was that British mathematicians had already cracked his unbreakable code months earlier. Every message he would transmit, every coordinate he would report, every attack he would plan was being read by Allied intelligence officers hundreds of miles away. The hunter had become the hunted, but the Germans had no idea their perfect cipher had been turned against them, making their own communications the weapon of their destruction. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The autumn wind whipped across Lorient's concrete submarine pens as Kapitän Heinrich Lehmann-Willenbrock descended into U-Boat 96. The smell of diesel fuel and machine oil filled his nostrils. His crew moved with practiced efficiency, checking torpedoes and testing communication equipment. The three-rotor Enigma machine sat secure in its mounting, a marvel of German engineering that promised perfect secrecy. Admiral Karl Dönitz had absolute faith in the machine's capabilities. "The enemy will never break our naval cipher," he declared to his submarine commanders. "Enigma gives us the perfect coordination needed for Wolfpack tactics." The mathematics seemed impossible to overcome. With over 150 trillion possible settings, the machine appeared unbreakable to German cryptographers. The Atlantic Ocean had become Germany's hunting ground. U-boat Wolfpacks prowled shipping lanes, coordinating attacks through Enigma-encrypted radio messages. In 1941 alone, German submarines sank 6.2 million gross tons of Allied shipping. Merchant vessels carrying food, fuel, and war materials to Britain lay scattered across the ocean floor. Lehmann-Willenbrock adjusted his Enigma rotors according to the daily key schedule. Each letter he typed transformed into seemingly random characters before transmission. German naval headquarters could coordinate dozens of submarines across thousands of square miles of ocean. The system allowed precise tactical control over the most effective submarine force in naval history. The U-boat commander plotted his course on nautical charts spread across the cramped navigation table. Weather reports, convoy sightings, and attack orders would flow through Enigma's encrypted channels. German naval intelligence tracked Allied convoy schedules and routes, feeding information to prowling Wolfpacks. Through their unbreakable communication system, no one aboard, Lorient submarine pens imagined that each coded word already had an audience thousands of miles away. The steady clatter of typewriters filled Hut 6 at Bletchley Park, 50 miles northwest of London. The smell of machine oil mixed with cigarette smoke as dozens of young women worked at computing machines called bombs. These mechanical devices, each the size of a large wardrobe, whirred and clicked as they tested thousands of Enigma settings per hour. Alan Turing paced between the machines, his mathematical mind focused on the German naval cipher. The brilliant Cambridge mathematician had designed the bomb's logical framework with Gordon Welchman, transforming theoretical cryptanalysis into mechanical reality. Each machine contained 36 Enigma equivalents, testing rotor positions at lightning speed compared to human calculation. Joan Clark bent over, intercepted German signals, searching for patterns that might reveal daily key settings. The German operators sometimes made small mistakes, using predictable phrases or repeating message formats. These tiny human errors gave British code breakers their opening into the seemingly perfect cipher system. Winston Churchill visited Bletchley Park regularly, understanding the strategic value of signals intelligence. He called the code breakers the geese that laid the golden eggs but never cackled. The Prime Minister demanded absolute secrecy about ultra-intelligence, the code name for information derived from broken enemy communications, Joseph Rochefort. An American naval intelligence officer observed British methods with intense interest. The United States Navy had begun its own cryptanalytic efforts, but Bletchley Park's industrial approach to code-breaking impressed the visiting Americans. They watched teams of civilian women operating complex machinery to break German military secrets. By mid-1941, Bletchley Park decoded over 2,000 German signals daily. The information flowed directly to Allied naval headquarters, where intelligence officers plotted U-boat positions on massive Atlantic charts. German submarine movements, previously invisible, became predictable through their own communications. The breakthrough had strategic implications beyond immediate tactical advantage. British cryptanalysts realized they could anticipate German naval operations, redirect merchant convoys away from submarine concentrations, and coordinate anti-submarine warfare with unprecedented precision. Across the ocean, Americans would take these lessons and scale them beyond imagination. Sparks flew from welding torches as Henry Kaiser's shipyard workers assembled another Liberty ship at Richmond, California. The hammer blows of riveters echoed across San Francisco Bay, while massive cranes lifted prefabricated sections into place. American industrial capacity was awakening to the demands of global warfare, transforming theoretical production into maritime reality. The Liberty ship Robert E. Peary set a construction record that amazed even experienced shipbuilders. Kaiser's workers assembled the entire 441-foot vessel in just 4 days and 15 hours from keel laying to launch. The achievement demonstrated American manufacturing capability that German naval planners had never considered in their Atlantic strategy. German U-boat construction required 3 to 6 months per submarine in heavily defended shipyards. Skilled craftsmen assembled each vessel by hand, using traditional methods that prioritized quality over quantity. The contrast with American mass production techniques revealed fundamentally different approaches to industrial warfare. Liberty ship construction employed assembly line methods borrowed from automobile manufacturing. Workers specialized in specific tasks, using prefabricated components that minimized skilled labor requirements. The ships were simple, reliable, and most importantly, fast to build. Quality mattered less than quantity when facing submarine warfare. In 1942, American shipyards launched 100 Liberty ships, while Germany completed fewer than 200 U-boats. The mathematical relationship favored Allied merchant shipping by a margin that made sustained submarine warfare impossible. Each U-boat might sink several merchant vessels, but American shipyards replaced losses faster than German submarines could inflict them. Mary Watkins operated a massive crane that lifted engine blocks into Liberty ship hulls. The African-American woman had moved from domestic work to defense industry employment, earning wages that supported her family while contributing to the war effort. Her work connected directly to Atlantic convoy battles thousands of miles away. The shipyard operated around the clock, with workers arriving by streetcar and automobile from across the Bay Area. The scale of operation impressed visiting military officers who understood the strategic implications. American abundance in steel, aluminum, and skilled labor created maritime capacity that overwhelmed Axis submarine forces. The Atlantic War was no longer decided only by captains, but by welders and riveters working in California shipyards. Red yarn traced submarine positions across massive charts covering the walls of the Admiralty's Operational Intelligence Center in London. Each piece of yarn represented a German U-boat located through intercepted Enigma communications. The intelligence allowed Allied naval officers to redirect convoy routes away from submarine concentrations, turning German communications into tactical disadvantages. Commander Roger Wynne studied the submarine plotting board with growing confidence. Ultra-intelligence provided real-time information about German naval movements that transformed convoy protection from reactive to predictive. Instead of responding to submarine attacks, Allied escorts could position themselves to prevent attacks entirely. The breakthrough came when British cryptanalysts achieved consistent, rapid decryption of German naval Enigma. Previously, breaking individual messages required days or weeks of analysis. The new methods provided tactical intelligence within hours of German transmission, making the information operationally useful for convoy routing decisions. German submarine commanders continued transmitting detailed position reports, weather observations, and attack plans through Enigma channels. They believed their communications remained perfectly secure while Allied intelligence officers read every message. The psychological advantage gave Allied naval forces unprecedented insight into enemy intentions and capabilities. Convoy losses dropped dramatically when routes could be adjusted, based on submarine positions revealed through ultra-intelligence. Ships that might have sailed directly into wolfpack ambushes instead followed safe corridors identified through decrypted German communications. The ocean remained dangerous, but no longer unpredictably so. Lieutenant Commander John Walker commanded escort vessels protecting Allied convoys across the Atlantic shipping lanes. His destroyers and corvettes could coordinate anti-submarine sweeps based on intelligence about German submarine concentrations. What had been random patrol work became targeted hunting expeditions. From May through December 1943, Allied forces sank 141 German U-boats, while convoy losses fell to sustainable levels. The turning point reflected superior intelligence, combined with increased escort strength and improved anti-submarine weapons. German naval communications had become their tactical weakness. Rather than strategic strength, every intercepted message was both a warning flare and a death sentence. For German submarine crews who trusted their communication security, coal smoke drifted across the Messerschmitt aircraft factory floor in Augsburg as German workers assembled fighter planes under increasingly difficult conditions. Raw material shortages forced supervisors to substitute aluminum components with steel alternatives that added weight and reduced performance. The smell of industrial fatigue mixed with mounting desperation as Germany's war production struggled against Allied bombing campaigns. Ingrid Müller operated a rivet gun on Messerschmitt Bf 109 wing assemblies, working 12-hour shifts that left her exhausted and hungry. Food rationing meant workers received limited calories while performing physically demanding labor. The contradiction between military necessity and civilian hardship created tension. Throughout German industrial centers, Luftwaffe fighter squadrons relied on Enigma-encrypted communications to coordinate defensive operations. Against Allied bombing raids, German air traffic controllers transmitted detailed information about incoming bomber formations, fighter intercept vectors, and airfield conditions through their secure communication networks. They believed their tactical coordination remained invisible to Allied intelligence. The reality was devastatingly different. British and American intelligence officers read German air defense communications in real time, providing Allied bomber crews with information about fighter dispositions, radar capabilities, and offensive tactics. What Germans intended as coordination became Allied tactical advantage through compromised communication security. Allied bombing tonnage increased dramatically as intelligence-guided targeting improved accuracy and reduced losses. In 1942 and 1943, Allied air forces dropped 3 times more explosives on German industrial targets than in previous years. Factories, refineries, and transportation networks suffered systematic destruction that crippled war production. Hans Weber worked as a foreman in the Messerschmitt engine assembly section, watching production numbers decline despite longer working hours and reduced safety standards. Copper shortages forced engineers to redesign electrical systems. Aluminum rationing meant aircraft frames used heavier materials that reduced flight performance and range. The contrast between German resource scarcity and Allied abundance became visible in daily production statistics. While German aircraft factories struggled to maintain output, American manufacturers increased production exponentially. The mathematical progression favored Allied air power by margins that made sustained Defensive operations impossible. Each siren blast proved Enigma could not stop the bombs. Falling on German industrial centers, teleprinters hummed continuously. At Arlington Hall, Virginia, where American cryptanalysts processed thousands of intercepted Axis communications daily. The scale of American signals intelligence operations dwarfed even Bletchley Park's impressive capabilities. Democracy's industrial approach to intelligence gathering transformed British innovations into overwhelming analytical capacity. Colonel William Friedman supervised teams of young women operating mechanical tabulating machines that sorted intercepted radio traffic by frequency, time, and transmission characteristics. The Americans applied mass production techniques to cryptanalysis, creating assembly line methods for breaking enemy codes and analyzing their intelligence value. The United States signal. Intelligence service expanded rapidly after observing British methods at Bletchley Park. American engineers improved upon British bomb designs, creating faster, more reliable machines for testing Enigma key settings. Industrial capacity that built Liberty ships and aircraft also produced cryptanalytic equipment. Joseph Rochefort returned from his British liaison assignment with detailed knowledge of ultra-intelligence methods. American naval intelligence incorporated British lessons while scaling operations to match American industrial capabilities. The result was signals intelligence production that exceeded German communication security by overwhelming margins. By 1943, American cryptanalysts processed over 30,000 intercepted communications daily from German, Japanese, and Italian sources. The volume of intelligence required industrial organization, teams of analysts, translators, and intelligence officers working in coordinated shifts around the clock. Lieutenant Grace Hopper programmed early computing machines to assist with cryptanalytic calculations that previously required days of manual work. The marriage of American technology and mathematical expertise created capabilities that enemy cryptographers never anticipated when designing their cipher systems. American abundance in skilled personnel, electronic equipment, and organizational resources overwhelmed Axis communication security through sheer scale. Where German cryptography relied on mathematical complexity, American cryptanalysis applied industrial methods that reduced complex problems to mechanical processes. The contrast reflected broader strategic differences between democratic and totalitarian approaches to warfare. German emphasis on elite expertise met American democratic mobilization of entire populations toward common objectives. The Germans thought secrecy was a fortress. America had turned intelligence into a factory producing tactical advantages daily. North Atlantic storm winds howled across convoy SC-122 as escort destroyers formed protective screens around 43 merchant vessels carrying vital supplies to Britain. The smell of salt spray and diesel exhaust filled the air while radar operators scanned for submarine contacts. Allied naval officers possessed unprecedented intelligence about German Wolfpack positions through ultra-intercepts. Commander Peter Gretton commanded the escort group protecting the convoy, coordinating anti-submarine sweeps based on decrypted German communications. His destroyers and corvettes could anticipate U-boat attack patterns rather than react to sudden torpedo strikes. Intelligence transformed convoy protection from defensive to offensive operations. German U-boat commanders continued transmitting detailed position reports to coordinate Wolfpack attacks, unaware that Allied intelligence officers plotted their movements on Admiralty charts. Kapitän Heinrich Lehmann-Willenbrock reported his position and fuel status through Enigma channels, providing information that Allied escorts used to avoid his submarine entirely. The tactical revolution reflected superior intelligence combined with increased escort strength and improved anti-submarine weapons. Convoys that might have suffered devastating losses instead followed safe corridors identified through intercepted German communications. The ocean remained dangerous, but no longer unpredictably so. Allied shipbuilding capacity replaced convoy losses faster than German submarines could inflict them. Liberty ships joined convoys in numbers that overwhelmed U-boat attack capabilities. Mathematical ratios favored Allied merchant shipping by margins that made sustained submarine warfare impossible for Germany. From May through December 1943, Allied anti-submarine forces sank 141 German U-boats, while convoy losses dropped to sustainable levels. The turning point reflected American industrial capacity, guided by British intelligence breakthrough. German naval communications had become their tactical weakness rather than strategic strength. U-boat crews faced increasingly dangerous patrols as Allied escorts anticipated their positions and attack plans. What had been successful hunting expeditions became survival challenges against forewarned and heavily armed convoy defenders. The psychological impact on German submarine crews was devastating. Successful Wolfpack tactics that had dominated the Atlantic shipping lanes for 2 years suddenly became death traps, as Allied escorts appeared exactly where U-boats planned ambushes. For every U-boat sunk, another Liberty ship left American ports carrying supplies that sustained Allied resistance. Thunder from Boeing B-17. Flying Fortress bombers filled the sky above the Ruhr Valley as the 8th Air Force conducted precision bombing raids on German industrial targets. The smell of aviation gasoline and gunpowder mixed with smoke rising from burning factories below. Allied bomber crews possessed detailed intelligence about German air defenses through intercepted Luftwaffe communications. Colonel Curtis LeMay led bomber formations, armed with targeting information derived from Ultra, intelligence about German industrial capacity and defensive capabilities. Decrypted German communications revealed radar positions, fighter squadron locations, and anti-aircraft gun deployments that allowed precise mission planning for maximum tactical advantage. German air traffic controllers transmitted detailed information about incoming bomber formations through Enigma encrypted channels, believing their defensive coordination remained secure from Allied intelligence. The reality was that American and British intelligence officers read German air defense communications faster than German commanders could act on their own tactical information. Precision bombing accuracy improved dramatically when Allied targeting relied on intelligence-guided selection of critical industrial facilities. Instead of random area bombing, Allied air forces struck specific factories, refineries, and transportation networks that crippled German war production most effectively. The mathematical progression of Allied bombing tonnage overwhelmed German defensive capabilities through sustained industrial attack. In 1944 alone, Allied air forces dropped 1.6 million tons of explosives on German targets, compared to fewer than 500,000 tons in all previous years combined. Technical Sergeant Robert Morgan piloted the Memphis Belle through flak-filled skies above Schweinfurt's ball-bearing factories, relying on intelligence about German fighter intercept patterns to navigate the most dangerous portions of bombing runs. His crew understood that their survival depended partly on information gathered by cryptanalysts they would never meet. German industrial workers watched Allied bombers approach with terrible regularity, knowing that air raid sirens provided insufficient warning against intelligence-guided targeting. What had been random harassment became systematic destruction of German manufacturing capability. The contrast between American abundance and German scarcity became visible in daily bombing statistics. While German factories struggled with material shortages and bomb damage, American aircraft production increased exponentially throughout the war. The sky itself had become the weight of American industry, pressing down on German manufacturing centers. German tank crews siphoned precious fuel from abandoned vehicles along muddy roads leading toward the Normandy beachhead. The smell of burning diesel and desperation filled the air as panzer divisions faced operational paralysis despite possessing technically superior armor and experienced crews. Fuel shortages had immobilized half the German armored forces. By 1944, Oberst Hans von Luck commanded Panzer Division 21 near Caen, watching his tanks sit motionless in Norman fields while Allied armor advanced with seemingly unlimited fuel supplies. German logistics had collapsed under sustained Allied bombing of refineries, transportation networks, and supply depots throughout occupied Europe. Allied intelligence guided systematic targeting of German fuel production facilities through ultras. Intercepts that revealed petroleum storage locations, refinery capacity, and transportation schedules. What Germans intended as secure logistical communications became targeting information for Allied bomber crews. Fuel shortages created tactical paralysis that no amount of tactical skill could overcome. German tank crews possessed superior training and combat experience, but stationary armor became vulnerable targets for Allied fighter bombers and artillery rather than mobile weapons platforms. The mathematical comparison revealed strategic impossibility for German armored operations. Allied fuel production exceeded German capacity by ratios that made sustained mechanized warfare impossible for Axis forces. American petroleum industry alone produced more aviation gasoline than Germany's entire fuel output. Feldwebel Klaus Müller operated a Panzer IV tank that had remained stationary for 3 weeks while waiting for fuel allocation from increasingly disrupted supply networks. His crew maintained their vehicle meticulously while watching Allied Sherman tanks maneuver freely across Norman countryside with abundant logistical support. German commanders received Enigma encrypted orders to launch counterattacks against Allied beachheads, but lacked fuel necessary to execute tactical movements. Perfect communication security meant nothing when tanks could not leave their assembly areas for lack of gasoline. The irony was devastating for German military tradition that emphasized tactical excellence and operational mobility. Superior equipment and training became irrelevant when basic logistics failed under Allied industrial pressure, guided by compromised German communications. Industrial abundance had proven more decisive than martial tradition or tactical innovation in modern mechanized warfare. Codes could not fill empty fuel tanks, nor could communication security forge steel that German factories could no longer produce. Channel waves broke against the hulls of 7,000 Allied vessels assembled for Operation Overlord, as the largest seaborne invasion in history approached the Norman coast. The smell of salt air mixed with diesel exhaust from landing craft. Engines, while Allied commanders possessed unprecedented intelligence about German defensive positions through ultra-intercepts. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. General Dwight Eisenhower coordinated the supreme invasion effort with detailed knowledge of German troop dispositions, defensive preparations, and communication networks derived from broken enemy cipher systems. Allied intelligence officers had read German defensive plans 4 months before the invasion began. German commanders transmitted detailed reports about Atlantic wall fortifications through Enigma channels, believing their defensive coordination remained secure from Allied intelligence gathering. The reality was that American and British planners possessed more accurate information about German defenses than many German field commanders. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel inspected beach obstacles and concrete bunkers along the Norman coast, unaware that his detailed defensive reports were being read by Allied intelligence officers who used the information for invasion planning. German communication security had become an Allied tactical advantage. Allied deception operations succeeded partly because ultra-intelligence revealed German intelligence assessments and offensive reactions to false information. The German High Command believed Allied invasion forces would land at Pas-de-Calais rather than Normandy, partly because their own communications revealed this strategic misconception. On June 6, 1944, 156,000 Allied troops landed on Norman beaches with casualties lower than expected due to precise intelligence about German defensive capabilities and troop movements. The invasion succeeded partly because Allied commanders could anticipate German tactical responses through intercepted communications. German panzer reserves received delayed deployment orders due to confusion in the High Command about Allied invasion intentions. Ultra-intelligence had revealed German decision-making processes that allowed Allied planners to exploit command structure weaknesses. The contrast between Allied coordination and German confusion reflected superior intelligence combined with overwhelming material superiority. While German defenders fought with skill and determination, they lacked the tactical flexibility that comes from secure communications and adequate reserves. What the Germans trusted most, their unbreakable cipher system, had betrayed them silently by revealing their defensive plans to Allied intelligence officers. Quiet chalkboards at Allied Supreme Headquarters covered every wall with statistical comparisons that told the mathematical story of American victory in World War II. The numbers spoke louder than battlefield heroics about industrial democracy's triumph over totalitarian military systems. Allied staff officers compiled production figures that revealed strategic impossibility for continued Axis resistance. Liberty ship production totaled 2,710 vessels, completed in American shipyards between 1941 and 1945, compared to Germany's total wartime merchant ship construction of fewer than 500 vessels. The mathematical relationship meant Allied shipping. Capacity increased while German submarine warfare became strategically irrelevant through overwhelming replacement capability. German U-boat losses reached 863 submarines, destroyed out of 1,162 total, deployed during the Atlantic campaign. The casualty ratio reflected superior Allied intelligence, increased escort strength, and industrial capacity that overwhelmed German naval construction through sustained attrition warfare. American aircraft production reached 300,000 military airplanes during wartime, compared to Germany's total of 119,000 combat aircraft. The production comparison revealed strategic air superiority that made German defensive operations impossible against sustained Allied bombing campaigns targeting industrial capacity. Colonel William Donovan studied intelligence summaries that demonstrated Ultra's strategic impact on Allied victory. Signals intelligence had shortened the war by approximately 2 years, while saving millions of Allied casualties through superior tactical coordination and strategic planning. The human cost of shortened warfare represented incalculable savings in lives, resources, and global destruction. Mathematical projections suggested the war might have continued until 1947 without intelligence advantages that accelerated German defeat through compromised communications security. Allied industrial capacity had proven decisive when guided by superior intelligence about enemy capabilities, intentions, and weaknesses. American abundance in steel, petroleum, aluminum, and skilled labor created military advantages that no amount of tactical skill could overcome. Statistical analysis revealed that democratic industrial mobilization had overwhelmed totalitarian military tradition through systematic application of technological and organizational superiority. The numbers themselves had become weapons more powerful than individual heroism or tactical innovation. The scale itself was victory. Intelligence had simply made the mathematical avalanche faster and more precise. Post-wars, lecture halls at American universities, filled with veterans who had participated in the most secret aspects of Allied victory, though most remained bound by classification restrictions that would last decades. The smell of chalk dust and afternoon sunlight filtered through windows as former codebreakers quietly returned to civilian careers without recognition for their wartime contributions. Professor Joseph Rochefort taught mathematics at a California university, never mentioning to his students that he had helped break Japanese naval codes at Pearl Harbor and coordinated signals. Intelligence cooperation with British cryptanalysts at Bletchley Park. His wartime service remained classified until the late 1970s. Joan Clark returned to academic work in England. Her contributions to Enigma cryptanalysis, unknown to colleagues who saw only a quiet mathematics instructor. The women who had operated bomb machines and analyzed German communications disappeared into post-war anonymity, while their achievements remained state secrets ultra. Intelligence classification meant that official law histories omitted the most decisive factor in Allied victory for 30 years after the war ended. Veterans who knew the truth could not speak about signals intelligence contributions that had saved millions of lives through shortened warfare. The strategic impact of compromised German communications became clear only when classified. Documents revealed the scope of Allied intelligence advantages, every German tactical plan, operational movement, and strategic decision had been visible to Allied commanders through intercepted and decrypted enemy communications. Historical analysis suggested that ultra-intelligence had shortened World War II by approximately 2 years, while reducing Allied casualties through superior tactical coordination and strategic planning. The mathematical calculation represented millions of lives saved through cryptanalytic breakthrough and industrial application. American industrial capacity, guided by British intelligence innovation, had created strategic advantages that overwhelmed Axis military capabilities through systematic application of democratic organizational principles. Abundance in materials, technology, and human resources had proven decisive when coordinated through superior information systems, the marriage of American productive capacity with signals. Intelligence represented a new form of warfare that made traditional military expertise secondary to industrial coordination and technological innovation. Victory had belonged to the side that could process information faster and produce weapons more efficiently. Freedom had been secured not only by courage in battle, but by abundance harnessed to knowledge, the ultimate American arsenal that combined democratic values with industrial might. The war had ended, but its echoes lingered in silence. In May 1945, as German forces surrendered unconditionally across Europe, the Enigma machines sat in bunkers, aboard shattered submarines, and in abandoned command posts. Some were smashed with hammers or thrown into rivers by German operators under orders to deny their use to the enemy. Others were captured intact by advancing Allied troops. For the men who had trusted them, the submarine commanders who sent position reports, the Luftwaffe officers who transmitted scramble orders, the panzer leaders who requested fuel, the machines had been symbols of certainty. They believed Enigma had never failed them. The truth was far more devastating. Their most secure ally had, in silence, betrayed them for years. But in the streets of Berlin, in the ruins of Cologne, and in the ravaged industrial districts of the Ruhr, few Germans pondered the fate of their cipher machines. Their concerns were immediate: food, shelter, and survival. The millions of refugees fleeing bombed cities, the soldiers returning to a homeland carved into occupation zones, the mothers searching for lost sons, these were the faces of defeat. The intellectual catastrophe of Enigma's compromise remained invisible, buried beneath the rubble of war and the secrecy of Allied intelligence. At Bletchley Park, the sprawling estate that had been the epicenter of Allied code-breaking, the gates closed to outsiders. The hundreds of women who had operated bombs, the mathematicians who had devised clever algorithms, the engineers who had built machines of whirring rotors and clattering relays, all signed binding oaths of secrecy. They scattered into post-war life without public acknowledgement. Some returned to universities, others to civil service, many to quiet domesticity. Alan Turing himself received no medals, no public thanks. Instead, he carried both the burden of secrecy and the scars of personal injustice into the cold years that followed. Ultra, the code name for intelligence derived from broken German ciphers, remained classified at the highest levels. Churchill had once said that the success of Ultra must remain a secret for perhaps 50 years. He was nearly correct. Not until the 1970s would the public learn the full scale of the deception that had shaped the war's outcome. In the meantime, countless histories were written with gaps. Explanations left vague, sudden turns of fortune attributed to luck or boldness, rather than the silent hand of intercepted communications. For German veterans, this secrecy meant living with distorted memories. U-boat captains who wondered why Allied convoys always seemed to avoid their wolf packs never learned in their lifetimes that their position reports had been read hours after transmission. Luftwaffe commanders who watched bombers strike factories with uncanny accuracy blamed spies, not compromised messages. Panzer officers immobilized by fuel shortages cursed the bombs that rained on refineries, never realizing that their supply requests had guided the raids. The war they fought had been shadowed by an invisible adversary, mathematics, machinery, and patient human persistence. In the aftermath, Allied leaders faced a moral dilemma rarely discussed in official communiques. How much should they reveal about what they had known and when? Ultra-intelligence had provided detailed knowledge not only of military operations but also of atrocities. Intercepts revealed orders about deportations, the movement of trains to extermination camps, the existence of ghettos where hunger and disease ravaged civilian populations. Yet the secrecy of Ultra was so critical that sometimes, even with knowledge in hand, action was delayed or restrained to avoid revealing the source. Historians continued to debate whether more could have been done, whether the price of protecting the code-breaking secret was too high when measured against human lives. What is undeniable is that the existence of Ultra compressed the war's timeline. Studies conducted after declassification suggested that the war in Europe might have lasted until 1947, without the constant stream of intelligence guiding Allied strategy. Millions more might have perished in combat, starvation, or the machinery of genocide. The painful irony remains. Secrecy preserved victory, but at costs that weighed heavily on the conscience of those who knew. For the Germans, the unshakable faith in Enigma reflected a deeper cultural blind spot. German engineering tradition, with its emphasis on precision craftsmanship and mechanical superiority, produced a machine of immense complexity. The designers calculated the astronomical number of possible settings, hundreds of trillions for the naval variant, and concluded that no human mind could ever penetrate it. They were correct, in a sense. No human alone could. But they failed to imagine the union of mathematics with machinery, of logic with industry, of dozens of bombs running day and night. Guided by patient analysts searching for patterns in the chaos, the blindness was not simply technical. It was also psychological. German commanders assumed their enemies lacked both the imagination and the resources to sustain such a monumental cryptanalytic enterprise. They underestimated democratic society's ability to mobilize entire populations not only for factories and shipyards, but also for the silent battle of ideas. The very openness of British and American academic traditions, the free exchange of knowledge, the eccentric creativity of minds, like Turing's, proved decisive against the closed rigidity of German hierarchical thinking. The deeper story of Enigma's defeat is also the story of industrial democracy. The Allies combined secrecy with openness, control with creativity. Women who had never before been allowed to participate in technical work became essential to cryptanalysis, operating machines, recording data, analyzing message traffic. Mathematicians collaborated with engineers, linguists with typists, naval officers with civilian clerks. Bletchley Park was not a military hierarchy, but a peculiar ecosystem of cooperation, and it was precisely that flexibility that allowed breakthroughs to occur. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the American approach expanded the principle into industrial scale. Arlington Hall, the U.S. code-breaking center, resembled a factory as much as an intelligence post. Row upon row of clerks processed intercepts. Engineers refined machines faster than their German counterparts could adjust ciphers. Translators converted reams of German, Italian, and Japanese text into actionable intelligence. Just as Liberty ships rolled off assembly lines faster than U-boats could sink them, decrypted signals poured into Allied headquarters faster than German operators could rotate rotors. The lesson was stark. In modern total war, the battlefield was not only the ocean or the sky, but the factory floor, the classroom, the research lab. For decades, veterans of Bletchley Park and Arlington Hall remained silent. They watched parades honoring infantrymen and pilots, heard speeches about tanks and bombers, and quietly folded away memories of their own contribution. Some spoke to spouses in whispers, many not at all. A few carried guilt, knowing they had read enemy messages that foretold disaster for Allied units, but could not act quickly enough to prevent it. Others carried pride tempered by invisibility. In Germany, veterans of the Wehrmacht, Kriegsmarine, and Luftwaffe likewise carried silence, but of a different kind. They remembered comrades lost, operations inexplicably compromised, victories snatched away by an enemy that always seemed one step ahead. They did not know that their confidence in the Enigma machine had been their undoing. To admit such a truth after the war might have been unbearable. To realize that defeat had not only been military or industrial, but also intellectual. When the truth finally emerged in the 1970s, it reshaped the memory of the war. Historians rewrote narratives, adding a hidden dimension to battles once explained only by strategy or luck. Veterans who had lived in silence found their stories suddenly in demand. Bletchley Park, once a secret installation, became a museum. The bombs, once smashed and discarded, were reconstructed as testaments to ingenuity. Alan Turing, once prosecuted and forgotten, became a symbol of both scientific genius and social injustice. For Germans, the revelation was equally profound. It explained mysteries that had lingered for decades, why convoys had been so elusive, why Allied bombers had known where to strike, why U-boats had vanished in such numbers. It confirmed suspicions of betrayal, but in a form they had never imagined, not by spies in their ranks, but by the cold logic of mathematics. The legacy of Enigma did not end with victory parades or declassification. It seeded the future. The techniques developed to break German ciphers laid the foundation for modern computing. Turing's conceptual framework for the bomb foreshadowed the architecture of digital logic. The organizational structures at Bletchley and Arlington anticipated the information age, where vast flows of data would be gathered, processed, and applied to decision-making at speeds beyond human comprehension. The Cold War, almost immediately, absorbed these lessons. Cryptography and cryptanalysis became central to the struggle between superpowers. Secure communication, once the dream of German admirals, became the obsession of nuclear strategists. The invisible war of codes and machines never ended. It merely shifted theaters. Looking back, one can see in Enigma a parable of misplaced faith. The Germans believed that technology alone could secure victory. The Allies demonstrated that technology mattered only when embedded in broader systems of organization, creativity, and abundance. Enigma's defeat was not a simple triumph of one machine over another, but of an entire social model, flexible, cooperative, and open to innovation, over a rigid system that mistook complexity for invulnerability. The lesson endures. No code is unbreakable, no fortress impregnable, no certainty beyond challenge. Security lies not only in machines, but in the imagination of those who use them and those who oppose them. The Enigma story reminds us that arrogance blinds, and that secrecy, while sometimes necessary, carries moral weight measured in human lives. In the end, perhaps the most poignant image is not of machines or battles, but of people. The young women at Bletchley Park, bent over typewriters and wiring boards, whose names never appeared in history books for decades. The U-boat commander, peering through periscope lenses at Atlantic waves, unaware that his every report was being read ashore. The factory worker in California guiding a crane that swung engine blocks into Liberty ship hulls, never knowing that her labor, multiplied thousands of times, had tipped the scales of global conflict. History is often told through generals and politicians, but the true story of Enigma belongs to mathematicians, welders, clerks, and cryptographers, to ordinary individuals whose cumulative efforts created extraordinary outcomes. It belongs, too, to the silence they carried, a silence that outlasted the war, a silence that shaped memory itself. And so the final irony lingers. The machine built to guarantee secrecy became, in defeat, the greatest secret of the war. For decades, its betrayal remained unknown, even to those it had doomed. Only later did the world understand that Enigma had not only failed, but had become the silent witness to a truth larger than any cipher, that in war, as in life, knowledge is power, and the side that masters both the courage of arms and the wisdom of information will prevail. The Germans never knew until it was too late. The Allies knew but could not tell, and the world for a generation lived in the shadow of silence. If you enjoyed the story, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.